This is the Sunday meeting I do with my daughter. Now look, she just showed me. She is videotaping it, I guess, too. But these all get posted on my thing, so.
You wouldn't want to use my selfie stick?
You'll actually see a double. Now I want to cover some of the. I went to Church Unlimited, but I told Bethany, like, I'm so busy I forget to write little notes down. But I'm just going to try and cover a few chapters I've been reading, and also some of the verses that Bill mentioned in the message today, a few that I quote a lot. I'll do it real quick before I forget. He used a verse from the book of the prophet Habakkuk, and it's one it says, "Write the vision and make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it will surely come." That's one that I actually quote over time, and before I forget, let me do this too. I'm reading through Psalms. I'm going to make a few comments on 2 Samuel 6 and 7. Kind of been going through the book of 2 Samuel commenting. I'll try to comment on Revelation and Matthew and all. But when I'm reading through the Psalms, over the years I memorized. Some of the Psalms are short, like 7 or 8 verses, and there are some entire Psalms, like Psalms 1. I just memorized all those. But you forget what you memorize. Even if you study Scripture a lot and read it a lot, you'll forget, and when I reread the Psalm, I'll realize, oh, I had memorized this one many years ago, and you forget that you memorized it. Now, this is Psalms 127. It should be pretty much right, and it'll have to do with maybe some of the things I'm going to talk about. But it says David, now this is, I think Solomon wrote this one, which is the son of David. And it says, "Except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh, but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved sleep. Children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Happy is the man that hath his quiver," if I forget, I better take this out, arrow, okay? "Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. For as arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. They will not be ashamed, but they will speak with the enemy in the gates." Now, that might fit with some of the little things. I took this out because I quote part of that when I pray. I have an intercession time on Mondays and Fridays. I pray every day, but there are particular times where I cover. I try to pray for the whole world, and I break it down. I pray for the kingdom of God. But at a point of prayer, when I pray for the kids and also for all of our spiritual family, I pray that one. I quote it. It says, "Children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward." Okay, happy is the man that has his quiver full of them. Now, if you have disciples, on some of the videos I've been reposting, I noticed, because I'm reposting them, some were baptisms I've done. I've not done a whole lot of baptisms, but I've baptized some of the guys over the years in North Beach and in Padre Island and the ocean and all. The way that you build a house, the dynasty. I'm going to talk a little bit about the dynasty of David, because it fits into another teaching I'm doing that Bethany has not, I don't think she's been watching those videos, but the teaching in Galatians, the teaching in the book of Acts, talks about God's promise to King David that he will establish his dynasty forever. Now, these Psalms that I'm quoting, most of them are by King David, and some are by others, and this one I quoted today was by Solomon. All right, so God showed David something. What did he show him? He made promises to David. In 2 Samuel 6 and 7. Now, I have not been coordinating my reading along with, I'm reading through Matthew, I'm reading through Revelation, I'm reading through the Old Testament, Samuel, and I'm reading variously through the book of Psalms. And though none of these are coordinated, the last chapters I read the last 2 days, every one has, it's like a tapestry, even though you don't coordinate them. I don't read like it. It's good to have like a Bible that says 1 year you read through the Bible. I've never used one of those, but they are good because they will give you an Old Testament reading and then they'll give you one in the New Testament and they'll try to relate them. But if I added all of the chapters the last few days, everything would be speaking about the promise of God to the dynasty family of King David, how it's going to be fulfilled through the offspring of David, ultimately through Jesus Christ. The verses in Christmas time is God with us, Emmanuel. Those are the same words, the same imagery used in Revelation when it says the tabernacle of God is now with men. The same imagery when David restores the Ark of the Covenant in the Old Testament story of David. It comes back to the city. And when David restores it, they're all worshiping, praising God because it represents God's word coming back to God's people. Now, everything together in the vision of John and Revelation, that it says the tabernacle of God was opened in heaven and the ark could be seen. All of this fits in the promises of God that Christ is coming. And not only is he coming, but there will be a dynasty of people called the children of God, the sons of God. And it is through these people, the church, the kingdom of God, being manifested in the earth. This is how you influence society. Your children after you, your spiritual seed and your natural seed. You make deposits into them of the Word of God, of the gifts of God, and then those people carry on as followers even after you're dead, after you're gone. In 2 Samuel, now, all of that, how would it fit with the arrow? Okay, this little thing. Yesterday, Bill talked about a target today. Okay, look at my notes. Now look how I write my notes. Do you see that? I scribble, and it's just I do. I'm looking at one now. I almost forgot it. Bill said, and I write jokes and I show them to my daughter. I didn't show. Bill said you can have whatever you want. Like if you want to have a healthy body, you got to be disciplined. You got to hit the gym and things like that. You can have what you want. So you got to be willing to make the sacrifice. I didn't show this joke to Bethany, but I said I'm willing to pay the price. And then I put on the bottom for a pecan pie. Like, so would that fit?
That's what you want right now.
I wrote lots of cash. That was the joke, like I was kidding her. Let me give you this little arrow. And it fits somewhat with the psalm I just quoted. Okay? Your offspring, your dynasty, they're like arrows in the hand of a mighty man. So you send those people out. You anoint them, you bless them, you say, now you go to all the nations. I was at the park. I go to the park and see a lot of my street friends, and I hang out with them at the park. Now, I got some friends. I could mention this brother's name, but I'm not going to mention it. You've never seen him on video. I have known him for years. When I first moved to Corpus Christi, he used to have the real long hair. It's shorter now. He'd be playing that guitar on the corners, and everybody that's on the streets knows him. Okay. And he's good. He can sing the old rock. He's always out. He's always out. They live outside, my friends. But he's always on the go. So he showed up yesterday, and we had about 3 or 4 of the guys. Now, this friend, they'll buy little bottles of whiskey, and they'll be drinking their beer and all. And look, a few times they did offer to me, and I tell them, no, I almost got 4 years sober. And they're not pushing me. They do it like as a, see if I would want to drink. So this one particular friend, he knows now that I don't sip the whiskey bottle. So what he does is he'll take his, and as they're passing it around, he will say, and this one is for John. And he'll spill it on the ground. Oh. And he'll do it like 2 or 3 times, okay, and this is for John. Now, yesterday it was funny because one of my other friends, Albert, he had the little, small whiskey bottle. And as he passed it around, my other friend took it. He said, "This one's for John." And my friend Albert's eyes got huge.
Like you're wasting it.
Yes, but he didn't say nothing. So, but that friend of mine, he opened up a can of beans. He had a knife, and he was eating. He lives on the street for many years. So he had a knife and no can opener, and he opens up a can of beans. He gave a few to the dogs. And then his knife was dirty, and I could see he was trying to clean it. And I had an extra bandana in my jacket, which I found maybe a few weeks ago, like a brand new bandana. I forgot where I found it. I said, "Oh, I'll pick it up." And so this other friend always wears one, but he didn't have one on this day. So I said, "Here, take this and keep it." He said, "Oh, thanks." So he cleaned his knife from the beans. Then he put the bandana on. And when I left the house, this was yesterday, I always put on one of my little crosses. I got little leather straps, and I put on. And when I left the house, I said, "Oh, I forgot to put something on today. I forgot to put on the cross. I got to." So then, as we're there, he gave me this leather necklace. But I got the arrowhead from one of the other guys about 2 weeks earlier. The other guy made this.
Cool.
He makes. His name is Levi. He's a nice guy, Levi, younger guy, and he makes them. He's got a whole little thing. He shows how you break them, make them. So he gave me this. And when I got back to the house, I said, "I'm going to just glue this on there," because it didn't have anything on it. This is a homemade arrowhead from my friends, which is the people. They're the arrows. And we're quoting a little from this. Bill mentioned hit the target. He talked about arrows and all. So as I'm talking to my friend, and we're just there, we had a good time, and everybody wound up leaving. It was just us. He's got a lot of different things. He studied various movements and different things, and some things that he'll quote or, not necessarily in. But we were standing there in the park, and he quoted something from the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. But this came from like Jewish law. You have what's called the Talmud. And some of the stories in the Talmud are like Jewish religious wisdom or history, but they're not in our Old Testament Bible, which the Jewish people also have. The first 5 books of the Old Testament are called, we refer to them as the Pentateuch, and the Jewish people refer to them as the Torah. And we share a common, Christians and Jews share a common background, because the Old Testament is still the Bible that the Jewish people use. And we also, as Christians, use it, but we have the New Testament, which the Jewish people don't have, because in their religion they don't accept Jesus as the Messiah. And so they obviously wouldn't have the New Testament like we do. But as we were standing there at the park, my friend, he's just looking out at the birds standing up there, worship. He said, and he quoted something, and I didn't reference it, but it might be true. He said, John, in one of the Jewish stories about the temptation, it says when Jesus was tempted, and in the temptation, it says, Satan says, if you worship me, I'll give you all of this, all of the kingdoms of the world. And of course, Jesus rebukes the devil. But this part my friend told me yesterday, he said some of the old Jewish teachers say that Jesus said, I'm going to rule over the whole universe, Pleiades and Orion and all of the galaxies, and you offer me this. Now, we don't have that in our Bibles, and that might just be a folklore. But I told my friend, I said, but that actually is true. Because if Jesus gave in to the temptation, basically, you can have this one planet, that he would have sinned by giving in temptation. It was a deception anyway, and then he would have disqualified himself as being the Savior for mankind. But in Philippians 2 it says, because Jesus humbled himself, was obedient unto death, even the death of the cross, therefore God hath highly exalted him, and given him a name above every name. And Jesus has rule and authority over it all, over the whole universe. So I told my friend, I said, that's not in the Bible, meaning the story he was telling me, where Jesus said, you offer me this world, I can have the universe. I said, but it's biblically accurate, because he resisted the temptation, he humbled himself, and now there's scripture says there's no other name under heaven among men given we must be saved, and God has exalted him, given him a name above every name. So that does indeed include all of it, the universe and everything, the planets and all. So I thought it was interesting, because I got this from a friend on the day that I forgot to put something on, the little cross, and then as he was standing out there at the park, he's just looking out. And, that's how I pray on those little patios in my yard. When you're up in the morning, you pray. There's a verse I quote, I will stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the name and the majesty of the Lord my God. But just as we were at that park, just my friend looking out like that, he was looking at some of the birds. They live their lives outside. They live their lives. Do you know, if you look at the stars, I wake up in the morning, and if it's not foggy, I see those star patterns in the morning. And then at night, when I finish my last prayer at night, I see them. And I think sometimes our focus, it's very easy to get too caught up with everything that's going around down here. And sometimes you need to have that focus. Now let's see, 16 minutes. I want to cover real quick the 2 Samuel chapter 6 and 7. And at this stage of the story of King David, he now becomes king. And what happens with David is there's something called, my little cheap phone did better than my daughter's, because hers, I think, just clicked off. Okay, 2 Samuel, dynasty, kingdoms, children, blessings, all of these fit. David, in the Old Testament, we had what was called the Ark of the Covenant. I've taught it before. And the Ark was a little box that had the Ten Commandments in it. And when God gave them this and gave them the commandments, this little box was kept in a little tent system. And we refer to that as the tabernacle or the tent of Moses. So, as God delivered the people out of Egypt and he gave them the great deliverance through the Red Sea, what they did was they kept this little Ark of the Covenant with the Ten Commandments, and it had a few other things in it, Aaron's rod that budded, and some of the manna. But in that box it signified God's glory, God among the people. But in the Word, in the Ark, in that testimony, okay? So, King David, when he finally ascends to the throne, 2 Samuel 5 and 6, but I'm talking about chapter 6, he realizes that at one point when the ark was captured by the Philistines got judged by God. We covered this. And they said, let's get rid of this ark. And they sent it back. And it came back to God's people, the land of Israel. But it never wound up back under this tabernacle, which was called the Tabernacle of Moses. Now, David, at this stage of the story, he takes the city of Jerusalem, which becomes the capital of Israel, and it became the capital of Israel under the rule of David. He took it, and yet he realized, wait a minute, we want to get that ark. We want to get, that's the central piece of furniture of worship in their understanding of God. And David says, wait a minute, we're here seeking God, we got to get that thing back. Well, they go get it. It was at some guy's house for a while. And as they get it, in 2 Samuel 6, they all are bringing it back. It would be like if you recovered the most prized possession that you lost and it's coming back. And they're all worshiping and happy. Well, what happens is they're bringing it back and it's on a cart and it stumbles. And a guy by the name of Uzzah figures, I don't want the ark to fall. This is like God's presence. And he touches it, and guess what happens? God kills that man immediately. The story in 2 Samuel 6 says David feared God that day. Now, we don't read everything that happens here, but what does happen is David goes back to what they had, the Old Testament actually, and realize there's a particular way that this thing was to be transported. Then they realize it. When the man Uzzah was killed, which was one of David's men, David feared God, and then he sought and read through the law and found out they were doing it wrong. They were not supposed to touch it. There was a particular way. You had these like long staves or staffs, and it went through each side of the ark, through these rings that were made, and you picked it up like that. You were never supposed to actually touch it, and this was a prescribed thing that God had given. Well, then David figures out, okay, we did it wrong, this is how we're going to do it now, and they go so far, they make sacrifice and all. Now, when it returns in chapter 6 of 2 Samuel, David sets it up, but he doesn't put it under what was called the Ark or the Tabernacle of Moses. David sets up his own tent, and he puts it there. And in essence, though, this was a violation of the law, because David just had an open tent in the city of Jerusalem, where this ark, the box of the Ten Commandments, and David worships and praises, and there's this wonderful, this is where most of the Psalms were written, under this worship of God. This was a type of the new covenant, a type of how in Christ God tabernacles among us. The Word of God is right there in the tabernacle of Moses, which represents law. It was not open like that. It was in the Holy of Holies, with a particular room in the back. They had a room, sort of like a little tent with 2 rooms in it. But in David's tabernacle, it's open. People are seeing it right there, which was a type of access now to God, because Jesus, who is the son of David, down the road, gives open access. So it's really a wonderful picture now. But the interesting thing was David is worshiping and praising and all of this wonderful stuff. But David had a wife. I can't cover the whole story, but one of the daughters of Saul by the name of Michal, Michal. She was promised to King David earlier on in the story, 1 Samuel. And King David, David never got that wife. Saul gave that wife to somebody else. Well, now David did love her, and her name was Michal. Now that David comes to the throne, David says, one of the other things I'm going to take care of now is I'm going to go get my wife back, because she was promised to me. And the story's sad, because at this point, David's now king, and they go tell Michal, and she was married to somebody else. Because King Saul gave that daughter to somebody else out of spite. But now she's coming back to David. And it says her husband followed her all the way crying, the other man. And then he was sent home. So David got her. But this wife, Michal, when she saw David dancing before God, and he had what was called an ephod, which was a priestly garment. So he didn't have his kingly stuff on at that time, but he had a priestly garment on. And Michal saw him dancing and praising God. And his wife said, she despised him, it says, in her heart, and said to David, you fool, you acted like a fool today, like a child dancing in the streets. And King David said, God chose me before your father's household, and for me to sit on the throne. And he gave all this to me. He says, and I will yet be more vile. I'll even worship God in a way that maybe people think I'm foolish. And Michal is cursed that day, and she becomes barren. She doesn't have kids. But it's interesting, because in the Gospel of Matthew, I just read like the same night, which was either last night or the night before, Jesus says that disciples were asking, who's greatest in the kingdom? And Jesus says, bring me a little child. And he said, unless you become converted and be like this little child, you will in no wise enter into the kingdom. And there's a prophecy that says, when God restores the people of God, there will be kids playing in the streets. I even wrote this one down in one of my little verses. And there will be old men and young men and children in the streets. And you know, King David was despised by his wife, Michal, because he was acting like a foolish child, you know. just happy, praising God. But yet Jesus himself said, unless you become like a child, not meaning we're all going to go out and run around and dance, but look, I have a tambourine I play regularly, daily. I have worship that I do. And so a big part of it is the presence of God comes in, and this praise is worship. And in chapter 7, we see the establishing of David's kingdom, and we're seeing the restoration of the tabernacle, and all of that. God told David in chapter 7 of 2 Samuel. This is the famous chapter. I've mentioned it before, but actually read it again just the day before yesterday. When David is established and his family as a kingdom, you could say almost as a business, as a church or whatever, David's sitting around one day and he says, he had a prophet by the name of Nathan, who's prominent in the story of King David. And as David was sitting around, God blessed him. God gave him, established his borders, established him as the king of Israel out of the capital city of Jerusalem. And as David's sitting around one day, David says, you know, I have this wonderful palace. I have this wonderful house. And God is living, in so many words, in that little tent over there. That little tabernacle. It's just a tent that the Ark of the Covenant was under. Now, the way it was set up right at that moment was really a perfect picture of the new covenant. Do you understand? Because there's no law in the Moses tabernacle. The law was preventing the people from seeing that ark. Okay, it wasn't open. You couldn't see it. But under the tabernacle of David, or the tent that David had, it was open. And there was worship and praise. So that was really a great picture of what it was supposed to symbolize. That when the tabernacle or the Word of God is among us, coming through Jesus, and now in God living in us, God's actual presence in the people of God, that was a wonderful picture. But what David did, he said to his friend Nathan the prophet, he said, I have an idea. God's living in that tent over there. I'm going to build him a nice house too, which was a temple. Okay, the prophet Nathan, 2 Samuel 7, the prophet Nathan says, go do all that is in your heart, may you be blessed. But that night, God appears to Nathan, the prophet, and says, did I tell you to tell David that? All the time that I dwelt among the people and I was in a tent, did I ever command anybody to build me this big temple, this house? So he kind of rebukes David through the prophet Nathan. But yet he gives this wonderful promise to David. He says, but yet I'm going to establish your family forever. I'm going to make you a great dynasty, David. And even after you are dead, there's going to be a child that sits on the throne. Ultimately, it's fulfilled through Jesus, because he sits on the throne forever, raised, and he comes through the root and the offspring of David. But as Nathan tells David, this is what God said about you. David says, why would you say, you have dealt so wonderfully with us. You spoke about my family. You spoke about all these things. And David is so grateful that God made this promise to him. And ultimately, all of it is fulfilled through Jesus. In the New Testament, which I happen to be teaching Galatians, and I've been quoting Acts, all of these verses are understood in the New Testament as all of the children that come through Jesus, that are born of him. Paul makes the argument, all these promises were not to the natural seed, meaning just the natural Jewish people, but all these promises are fulfilled by faith, and all the children of God by faith. And this is how it's fulfilled. This is how all these things would come to pass, that the people of God, through faith in Jesus Christ, would be this never-ending family or dynasty, because we live forever. And so David, though he's not understanding everything at that point in the story, they're all fulfilled through Jesus Christ. And the way that fits with some of the verses today is the children are the heritage. the offspring. And it's all of the spiritual seed. Everyone that's a Christian. Paul makes this whole argument in the book of Galatians, which I'm teaching. He says, going back before David to Father Abraham, he says, it's not the natural ones that are the heirs of Abraham, but it's the ones, the children of the promise, all meaning the same thing. So everybody today that's a Christian is the fulfillment of these promises that God made. And we all come into the new covenant by grace. And children are an heritage of the Lord. It's a blessing from God. And the fruit of the womb is his reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. And David was a great warrior, but he understood it was through the people. It's through your kids, through your offspring. Okay, now, we covered a lot. I'll try to add those verses. I'll try to light my cigarette. Now, Bethany, questions? What else did we cover? Did I quote? I quoted the Habakkuk verse from Pastor Bill.
Oh, the Walmart thing. You can't forget that.
Oh, I
That
did
other-
it.
Oh.
Didn't I do it? I didn't do it.
No.
Oh, I'm surprised. That's like the big part. People watch it just for that. Okay, so I'm at Walmart. I almost forgot. This was yesterday. And so, believe it or not, I was in the line, the wrong line. There's only like 2 cash registers where you could buy cigarettes. So I was at Walmart, and I didn't know which one it was. So I waited a little bit, and then I got up to the register. But the lady in front of me, I would have skipped it. I bought other stuff. But the lady in front of me then did a price check, and they had to go all the way back. And so I wasn't that mad. But I said, well, actually, I said, being I'm sitting here waiting for the price check, and you should never move lines. I've done this before. Like, you think, oh, this line, I do it, and I wind up getting stuck in the longer line, checking out. And I never carry a cart. Everything I always buy, because I don't want to walk with a cart, I always get the little basket. So I said, okay, let me go to the line. She said, oh, no, this is the register, number 10 or whatever, 11 and 12. That's where you buy your cigarettes? Okay. So I go to that one. And sure enough, the lady in front of me, she's buying Diet Cokes, and they're $3 each. And she says, oh, I thought they were $2.50. All right, so I'm in another line where the lady right in front of me is the price check. Well, it took so long, the people behind me actually started moving right next to the register. 3 or 4 people did that. At that point, I thought, man, both of those you could buy cigarettes. But I was sitting there. I said, oh, that's fine. They sent her back to check. Price check. Then they came up. They went back twice or 3 times. So not only did the lady that was getting the price check apologize, I was not upset because I had to wait anyway. So she said, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. She says, and then the Walmart cash register lady says the same thing. I'm sorry, normally I said, oh, it's all right. I already changed lines. I'm here. I said, don't feel bad. I said, I've been diagnosed with a terminal disease. Now they're believing me. I'm bad. I said, and I have, the doctor told me I had till midnight to live. I was going to make it to the new year, and that would be it. I said, so I had about 6 hours left. I don't want you to feel bad. I said, but I actually wasted 1 hour of it just here. Well, they looked at me. Then I said to them, I said, no, I said, I'm kidding. Well, the lady at the register says, oh, that was funny. I said, I'm like, don't encourage me. Now I will be back, So that was the Walmart. I actually did it.
What if the woman said, I just had a terminal illness?
No, she actually was talking. We were there for so long. Her husband just passed away like a year ago.
Oh, Dad.
She had already mentioned that, but she said, oh, I said, no, I'm just kidding. And she kind of thought it was funny. And so, but they were nice, and I wasn't upset because I was just there anyway.
Yeah.
So
God.
that's how I'll end today's video.
You are terrible.
What was the other? Oh, there was something else, but I can't remember. So remember the promises. I'll add the verses of Samuel, the verse that Bill used in the service. It would be a good one. Write the vision, make it plain upon tables, that he may run that readeth it. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, for it will surely come. So the point is, even in the promises of David and all these things, actually it took generations for these things to be fulfilled. So what you might not see, Hebrews 11 says, Many of the patriarchs, it says they died not having received the promises, but they saw them afar off. Now, God can make deposits in your life that you're not going to see. David himself said it in the chapters I covered. God gave him promises that would be fulfilled after his death. You see, God says, oh, after you're gone, the people that you impact, they're going to go on and carry throughout the vision. So we should start looking dynastically or generationally, not everything in the immediate, okay? So if you're faithful to what God's called you to do, even after you're gone, because the joke was, I'll live to midnight, but look, all of our lives in the sight of God are like living till midnight, because James says our life is but a vapor, okay? And so, in essence, start thinking that way. Start thinking, plant the seeds, if you will. Make the deposits in this time, because it's that's going to make the difference after you're gone, all right? So we'll end with that. Father, I thank you for all of our friends. I pray that the verses, the different ones that I quoted and all, that you just take whatever particular one that was intended for whoever watches this video on the day they see it, and let them be changed by it. Let it have an impact on them. We ask a blessing on everybody in Jesus' name. Amen. Say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.
Okay, and the kitty. God bless everybody.